Hi, welcome. So, for this evening, I decided that we'd explore the concept of reviewing a fragrance. What does it mean to review? And what are the intentions behind reviewing? Are we reviewing a fragrance just to express our like or dislike? Or do we have a more careful observation of the fragrance to see if maybe, even if it's something that we would personally not wear, we can discern whether it has merit? Or are we reviewing, as in showcasing something to influence your audience to perhaps purchase it? Or do you just like the attention? You like to post a picture? You like photography? You like taking pictures of those pretty bottles and then maybe put down the notes pyramid and just maybe put a little bit of the original ad copy into that review, or maybe be a little bit inspired by other reviewers. So there's a lot of different things that we can consider in the concept of reviewing. So we'll be discussing that tonight. And my two guests will be Mr. Clean, and you may be familiar with him from Mr. Smelly Streams, and he's a friend of mine, and also Rachel.k.ng. She has an Instagram presence, and she has made recent appearances on some live streams. She has excellent knowledge and taste and a formidable collection as well, but she has a lot more to offer than that. So those are our two special guests. Then I have my good friend, Ryan, Perfume Bonfire, a regular panelist for Effluvium. So they will all be joining us shortly. So we'll start things off by taking a look at what's going on in the comments here. Hello, my dear friend. Hello, handsome gentlemen. Thank you for stopping by and listening and watching. Effluvescence. I like that. Hi, my dear. It doesn't need to be complicated. If it's a simple dark roast or medium roast, I like to sweeten it just a bit with some 2% milk, maybe some cream. I can get fancy pants sometimes too, and I'll have an espresso drink, but surprise me. Very nice. Chergui. I featured Chergui on the most recent video I did, top 10 tobacco fragrances. Wonderful. Ambre Nuit. Very lovely. Hello, Adam D. Hello there, Dunk. And hello, Philip 3 Alex. So, as usual, we will get things started by doing 3 first impressions. 2 of these of which were recommended to me because I had yet to really find a coffee-centered fragrance that spoke to me personally. So some people made some recommendations a few weeks back, and now I have a couple of those samples. And then a third one I got from my visit to Etiquette in Montreal, because I was struck by the name Sweet William, because I'm familiar that it is a type of dianthus, which is it's a scented dianthus. So dianthus is in the same family as carnations, Caryophyllus. And the name stood out to me. And also it happens to be my partner is named William, and he wanted a sample as well. He lost interest with it really quickly, and now I have it. And that will be my third one. The 2 coffee fragrances are Parlez-moi de Parfum, Wake Up the World. Now, I'm just assuming this is a coffee fragrance because of the name, Wake Up the World. I think that's why I ended up with this sample, but I could very well be wrong. And then Hilda Soliani, Bell'Antonio. That will be the other one, which I'm certain that one's a coffee fragrance. It was recommended not so far back. No acro yet. I haven't even begun to explore acro. I don't think that I have gotten any samples from the house. I'm very well aware of their scents, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Hello, Fernando. Thank you for your support, your ongoing support. Am I taking over the Tuesday? I'm taking over the Tuesday slot. Well, shucks. Wake Up the World is not a coffee fragrance. It is an updated Paloma Picasso Minotaur. You're already giving it away. So now, power of suggestion. With that knowledge, with that first impression, I'm going to be thinking of Minotaur and I'm going to be comparing it, but that's fine. With that in mind, we'll see how I feel about it. I just assumed that it somehow ended up in my pile of samples, and I thought maybe it was something I jotted down. It was like a coffee scent of some type. Okay. I think that's the Get Woke Movement's campaign slogan, Wake Up the World. I won't touch that one, my friend. Don't want to get into discussion about that. The only coffee scent I have is Black Phantom. Hi there, Pep. Thank you. Thank you for coming back. Aziad, that's Parfums d'Empire. That's one I have not yet sampled. Thank you very much, Dan. I look forward to it as well. I'm so happy that folks are joining us here. And hi, Alex, waiting to hear about Bell'Antonio. You were the one, in fact, I believe, who suggested it to me. I don't think you'd say that coffee is actually the centerpiece. Well, that might actually be good. All right, so let's get started with this. It's now 7:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I do want to bring in our guests shortly. So we'll start off with that one then, actually. All right, Bel Antonio by Hilda Soliani. And per tradition, I will do this first of the three on my right hand. Okay. This isn't exceedingly coffee, so you're right, Alex. Was it you who suggested it to me, or was it Ryan? Either one of you. I don't recall, but I ended up getting the sample. To answer your question, no, he's fair weather. He has much sensitivity to them. He is not anywhere near of an enthusiast of fragrances as I am. He is tolerant of them at the most, but sometimes he surprises me, and he'll get a sample. He is much more tolerant of top notes than dry downs. He's very sensitive of fixatives. Synthetics like ambroxan. I notice he's sensitive to amber woody stuff. He gets really sensitive to those musks. Certain things really set him off. So yeah, he is not anywhere near. He is not a convert. I don't think he ever will be, and that doesn't matter to me at all. Yeah, right. I think it was you, if you can confirm. Yeah, Alex is saying probably Ryan. So Ryan, I am sampling this one per your recommendation. Listen, it is not heartbreaking at all. When we're in relationships, you're going to be in relationships where people have different hobbies. In a lot of heterosexual relationships, you're going to have one person who's into makeup, and the other person's going to be into golf, and they're going to be passionate about either. And it's fine if there's no crossover with that. So I wouldn't say it's heartbreaking at all. It's fine. We have things that we have plenty of passions that we do share. So I've been told Aziad is one that I would really appreciate. So this one right here, that's my slogan. This one right here, Hilda Soliani's Bella Antonio smells nice. This is actually not a powerhouse, not a screamer at all. It's mellow, and I like its mellowness. I like that it's almost reminds me of coffee and cigarettes, and maybe like a coffee beverage with like a little liqueur in it. But it's nothing too pronounced. It's nice. I'm kind of into it. So yeah, I approve of that so far. Just the top notes. All right, next. Parlez-moi de parfum. Wake up the world. Parlez-moi de parfum. Wake up the world. All right. Let's see. Where is she here? This is because I know it does remind me a lot of like Minotaur. It totally is like this like orange creamsicle amber, kind of like Minotaur, kind of like Laura Biagiotti Uomo. It totally is. That's what I think. That's what I smell. That is definitely that's what I pick up from it, and well done, parlez-moi, but why? I mean, it doesn't seem like any different to me. I'd have to compare the two side to side. That's hilarious. It really does remind me of Minotaur. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely not something that I'm like, oh wow, this is I'm floored. I got to get myself a full bottle of this. I don't even have a full bottle of Laura Biagiotti Omo anymore. I thought it was kind of like an also ran for Minotaur. So Minotaur is as much as I need for this particular style. That's correct. Yep, David Bowie did wear Minotaur. That was his signature. I always like the coffee and intoxicated and follow to others that I have not yet tried. Yeah, that is yeah, it is a soft one. It's not a very wet, juicy tobacco. It's like it is sort of it plays second fiddle to the coffee. But even the coffee itself isn't so in your face. I definitely like this one more than the Parlez Moi. The Parlez Moi seems I don't know what the point of it is. Like it yeah. All right. That's the very first Parlez Moi that I've ever tried. Now that's the one that has the mouillette on the stand for the logo, if I'm not mistaken. The scent strips on the little clips as a logo. All right, enough of that one. And now the third one. The third one will be Sweet William from Carner, Barcelona. And just bear with me. This is a much sturdier. Did you hear that? I picked right up on the mic. All right, Sweet William. My William is sweet sometimes, but sometimes a pain in the tuchus. All right. Air. Ah, this does remind me of dianthus, like like dianthus flowers. It has sort of that herbaceous, peppery, somewhat clovey kind of dianthus smell. Dianthus versus carnations, which they're pretty much in the same botanical family. Dianthus is even a bit more powdery and herbaceous than carnation. This one makes me feel happy. I feel I feel like this is a comfort one. This is a comfort scent. All right, so out of the three, I would say so far it's a tie between. I'm gonna smell the Hilda Soliani. Yeah, I'm feeling this one. This is kind of like the kind of scent that has a coffee note that I can dig. I can dig it. I can get into it. It's a vibe, as the children say these days. So I like this, and I like the Sweet William. It's very subtle. We'll have to see what happens over time. Of course, I am a sucker for anything that is clovey, carnation. So I'm not surprised by that. And then the Parlez Moi. It's just like Minotaur, basically. Just what our good friend had just said earlier. Katie Puckrick has a great post on David Bowie and his smells. That's awesome. Okay. Hi. Hello. Hi, Dave. Thank you for joining us. Pot España. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. One of my favorite leathers. And the dry down of Jubilation has that norlimbinol thing that Initio side effect does. Yeah. And I'm not too crazy about that. I could do without all of that. Acro is close to follow without the earthy elements. Much more of a yummy cardamom coffee. Better than follow, too. Love putting cardamom into coffee. That's great. So date and cardamom in coffee, like a date syrup and cardamom. That's really tasty. And he would wear, Bowie would wear fluoresceating number 89. Very nice. And intoxicated is the smell of tea latte and Starbucks. All right. So the time is now 7:17. I think what I'm going to do first is bring in my regular panelist, Ryan, and we'll get the conversation started here on this lovely evening / morning / afternoon. Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Why don't I see you?
Do you not see me?
I don't see you, but does the audience see our guest? This is very strange.
I've got the stream on my phone. I can see myself on
That-
YouTube.
It's so bizarre. I can't see you from here. From my perspective in the StreamYard, I can't see you. I also can't see the guests that are in tow. This is very strange. Like, I trust that you were there. Wow, that's really unusual. It's kind of awkward because I'm just speaking to a void right now. You are there. I hear your voice, but I don't see you.
That's not great. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then I also see that Rachel and Mr. Clean they're waiting in the wings, but I don't see their images. It's going to make it a little awkward. So can anybody else have any issues seeing seeing Ryan? I don't know if this is some sort of strange technical issue or if it's just limited to me. Let's see.
They've started describing me in the comments for you, so that Maddie is describing my outfit of the day.
Okay.
Nice open sweater, apparently.
What is this all about? This is so strange. I can't see. Well, I guess we'll just have to. I mean, I don't know if I should refresh this because that might foul everything up. So I guess we'll just have to make do and just make the most of it. I can't see anyone. But how are you doing, Ryan? How are things faring?
Things are great. Things are even better now that I know that you like Bel Antonio, which is a fragrance that I enjoy very much. And I'm glad, especially when I recommend something, that it's a hit. And I think that one, yeah, it's just very nice. Like the way you said it, coffee and cigarettes, I think is the best version of that. Not like stale, awful cigarette smoking coffee like you could have, but like just a very pleasant version of that. I think
it is. It's coffee without the smoke. I mean, coffee without the smoke, cigarettes without the smoke. It's almost like the smell of fresh cigarettes rather than a cigarette with that ashy, smoky. It seems more like that. I always love the smell of a fresh pack of cigarettes. Like you open it up and there's just that aroma. And it does kind of remind me of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think what would be a good workaround would be maybe, I don't know if that would work. Like I could see you on my phone.
Sure.
See the guests on my phone. So that way I feel like I'm really talking to you guys. It's not the same. It's not the same if I can't see my guests. So let me see. Let me open my page up and make sure that I have it muted. One moment. Can I make sure this is turned entirely down? There you are. I'm looking at my phone right now and I can see you with a nice sweater. This is so bizarre. Very bizarre. Okay. So, hey, and I can see you moving your arm. See how I have to look down though? I have to look down at my phone. I have to look down at my phone to see you. Okay. Well, we'll just do it that way for tonight because I just don't want to mess anything up and end the broadcast prematurely and have to restart it. So we'll just do it that way. Okay, so I'm just looking at the chat here. All right, he's wearing a nice open sweater. It's just me. Wait, it's just me. What's that? Wait, I think that you were on by that point. Yeah, that's very strange. Okay. Well, I'm going to bring in the other two now, and hopefully this will work out okay. So at least everybody else can see all three of you. We're going to begin with Mr. Clean. He goes by Mr. Clean, and that is how I'm going to introduce him.
Hey.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going okay. So were you said it was just me. Was it that you...
No, earlier when it was happening, you were like, is it me or is it... And I was like, it is just you. We all, meaning we all can see you. Something's going on there.
It's not you just see just me. It's just me that only sees me.
Exactly. That's what I meant.
You have very good sound right now. That's important stuff.
Good. It's a new thing I'm doing here. So if it's too loud at some point or there's feedback, let me know.
That's fine. No, it's very resonant, which is good. All right, and now we're going to bring in Rachel. All right.
Hello.
I'm sorry that I'm so disoriented. I'm having to look at my phone to see you guys. I have to prop it somewhere so I can look over. It helps for me to see expression and to feel like I'm truly interacting. Otherwise, this is just sort of like I'm feeling like it's like a podcast of some type. I'm stuck in podcast world, and everybody else is in live stream world. But thank you so much for accepting my invitation for this evening. Mr. Clean, I don't know, would you mind muting when you're not speaking? I think it's like a little too intense, like the ambient sound.
Yeah, I can also try to turn it down.
Yeah, maybe do that. That way it's a little bit less ambient sound.
Let's try that. And I will mute it if needed, but
okay.
Is this better right now?
It's a little distorted. How about the audience? How are you hearing it? Those who are tuned in right now.
Sorry.
That's okay. Okay. So I decided that we're going to explore the topic of reviewing. What does it mean to be a reviewer? And I wanted to pick all of you guys, your brain on what is necessary to review a fragrance and what isn't necessary to review a fragrance. Oh, that was quite a ding-a-ling. Mr. Clean, would you mind muting yourself or just to see if it changed? Okay, great.
There, I'm unplugged. Now I'm just going on my standard.
Okay, so that's actually, I think, a little bit better just for this situation.
Sure.
Rachel, I wanted to start off with you. Now, do you consider yourself a reviewer, or do you feel like you just more informally chat about fragrance?
Yeah, I would consider, thank you for asking. I would consider myself a hobbyist. So not a reviewer. I don't expect brands to send me free things. I don't ask for them. I prefer to pay for everything myself. I'm not looking to make a business out of this. This is completely for fun, completely for a hobby, to meet people, to find friendships, to genuinely study the art as someone who appreciates and wants to have my own collection and wants to learn just for the pure sake of learning and the joy of it and the relax. Like I don't want this to be something stressful, right? I just want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And if it was a business or something like that, it would become a job and work. And so no, I wouldn't consider myself a reviewer. I do put my thoughts out there just because as I've started to learn about it, and I've found people like JJ, for example, or Mr. Clean now, and Ryan, now that I'm getting to know you guys, whose thoughts, whose palettes I trust and appreciate, that I genuinely do, because I live in the middle of nowhere. We are lucky that we have a Dillard's, right? That I genuinely do take your advice on what's, because even ordering a sample to be mailed to the middle of nowhere is expensive, right? So yeah. I really do search around the internet to find people who are knowledgeable, who are intelligent, who are trustworthy, etc. And I do use other people's opinions to make some of my purchasing decisions. But it's you have to find trustworthy people.
Right.
So to answer your short question, no.
Thank you. I think you bring up a very important point, and maybe something to illuminate further as far as the distinctions when being a reviewer. And I like that you say that you're a hobbyist, just somebody sharing your passion and enthusiasm. I think what's interesting, though, is that the definition of what it means to be a reviewer may have shifted, as far as reviewing a fragrance. And some of that shift has come with, like you said, the concept of a content creator who may have a certain motive in mind, or we'll take it to another level, an influencer. Like an influencer. What kind of reviewing is that versus somebody who decides to start a YouTube channel just to talk about a fragrance and give their thoughts and views on it? So I think that would be a very fertile sort of ground for discussion, just making those distinctions, because I think that's where people disagree on what it takes to review and what it means to review. Ryan, what do you think of that? What do you think of the way that reviewing fragrance may have changed in the past several years with YouTube and the like?
It's definitely, in the early days where it's kind of followed the trajectory of YouTube itself as a platform a little bit, hasn't it? Because YouTube in the early days wasn't super monetized. People were just kind of creating content, and then everybody realized there was an audience there, and advertisers flooded in en masse. And if you look at the very early fragrance content, it's not highly monetizable. It's not people making a career out of it. It's very hobbyist focused. And I think at some point you see the platform itself broadly beyond the fragrance world kind of shift over to a more structured form of content with a pattern associated with it that is, exists in a collaborative relationship with advertisers, a lot of sponsored content. And I think so what you see is also an attempt to reach out to an audience and what they're looking for. And the audience is often in the fragrance space, I think, bluntly looking for, should I spend this money on this fragrance, especially when there's so many fragrances out there, more than there were before. And it's harder than ever to access this. I think you've seen this sense of people becoming, trusted advisors on whether or not you should spend your money on a given fragrance or not. Like Rachel, that's not how I've ever seen myself. I see myself more as a hobbyist who's just kind of exploring fragrances and describing my own personal experience. But I think you see a lot of people directly ask that. I see that in responses on my videos a lot of times, like people directly asking questions about, well, is this really worth my money? Essentially, like it's the undercurrent. And I understand that wholeheartedly, because it's a question I often ask, especially with fragrances being as expensive as they are, but it's not my primary motive in talking about fragrance.
Yeah, it's interesting how we define ourselves as we create content. I know some people have a difficult time with that concept of being a content creator. It's like, what does that really entail? I just use that term out of convenience. I identify myself as a reviewer, but I'm definitely not looking to collaborate with brands. I'm looking to be neutral from brands. Like, I don't want partnerships. I don't want to promote fragrances in that way. I don't see myself as an influencer because I'm not trying to convince people they need to buy something. Actually, I don't want to convince people to buy anything at all. Like, I'd like to leave it to them to decide if it's a worthwhile investment to them. And I even try in my own language to be careful about that and not give, not feed into that pressure of FOMO, which is so abundant in the fragrance community and in content. But I think of myself even more so as like a writer. Like, I just like writing about fragrance. So more so than just being a reviewer, I consider myself more as a fragrance writer. And then that sort of developed into whatever it is today. Mr. Clean, what do you think is your role as far as part of the fragrance community? I don't think that you do much in the way of writing, but do you feel like you're reviewing in your own way through what you share about your opinions on fragrance?
Well, it certainly has come to that. That happens. As you know, I do not have a channel. I've had it any number of times over the last several months. People are like, you need to start your channel. And I'm like, no, guess what? Like what some of you have said about not wanting certain responsibility for like having to answer to somebody. I don't want the responsibility of having to expect that I need to do a thing regularly. I'll just show up elsewhere and let somebody else have a thing, and I'll just drop in if I can, right? And where I mostly do that, I mean, we might talk about any number of things, but we do talk a lot about fragrances. And every week I end up giving my opinion and my voice on any number of fragrances, sometimes one, but sometimes several, and I've been on record saying how something is amazing and I think people should consider it, and on record saying, I hate this. I don't know what you guys all see in it. So I am not a reviewer, but I am somebody who now interacts, who is part of FragCom in some way. But I guess I do have a voice about fragrances while I'm here. So I'm not a reviewer, but I'm in this weird spot, I guess. I don't know.
I think it's an important voice to have more people who are involved in the fragrance community who share to communicate in whatever medium, whether it's a live stream or what have you. That doesn't necessarily have that they are a person who really loves and appreciates fragrance without necessarily any objective of, I'm going to be, starting a huge YouTube channel and convincing other people that I have great taste. Like, having that voice, I think, is an important part, because it kind of is like a checks and balance in a way, because there's going to be a certain attitude coming from somebody who asserts themselves as an authority, whether that is deliberately or without their realizing it. That's what happens. So I think that's an interesting position to come from, that you interact with the community, but you're not necessarily a self-identified reviewer, content creator, influencer, whatever label you want to use. And that makes it valuable in its own way. And I always appreciate when that is part of the discussion, that it's not just a bunch of fragrance nerds who have YouTube channels who are sizing up each other's collections and figuring out, who has more knowledge on what. That makes up a large part of the fragrance community, or just those who are, they may not have a big collection. They may just have this healthy appreciation for fragrance. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, in a way, you said something that jogged me on this. In a way, I feel like I am a guy in the chat. I am those of you that are here watching and listening. I just happened to get on camera. It happened one day and I didn't go away, apparently. And some people like that. Some people are tired of me. It's how it goes.
It's a representation.
But I come at it like a lot of people who are just here in the chat, they're interested in hearing, they're interested in knowing some more, they're interested in hearing what people say about certain fragrances. They may not be reviewers, of course. They're just regular people, and it's like, oh, let's listen to what these people say. I was that guy. I'm just doing it on camera now.
Yeah, so. I think that's great. I really do. I think that element is necessary in this kind of arena, and we are happy that you volunteered to represent that voice. Pep has a really great question here for us. How many fragrance YouTube channels with 20,000 plus subs do you consider to be reviewers? So we do have these mega YouTubers, 20,000 plus. That leaves out even Persolays. Like, what are your thoughts on that? I'll start with you, Rachel. Do you follow a lot of YouTubers with subs that exceed that amount?
So no, actually, I don't. This is a great question, because it really makes me think about who and what and why I follow. I'll say for my own self, the reason I started posting, because I have an Instagram account and I post thoughts and I make silly videos on Instagram. And part of the reason I do that is to have an outlet for my thoughts, because otherwise I would drive everyone around me crazy, because they're not perfume people. They don't want to talk about perfume for hours and hours and hours. So it's a little bit of an outlet for me, right?
Yeah.
And I find myself, because I am, I think like everyone in this panel, a little bit more intellectually minded, a little bit more serious of a person. Like I'm not into those like goofy, like panty dropper videos, stuff like that. It's just not my style. It's not my thing. I'm a working adult. I'm interested in learning the real deal, right? And so I gravitate towards streams with more information and more serious content. And I think, I heard this statistic the other day that actually kind of blew me away, and this will tell you a little bit about my bias. I heard that only 30% of people in America have college degrees, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought it, just because of my personal experiences and I happen to have a college degree. The people I work with, it's a profession that requires one. And so, you just, sometimes you can get in a bubble and not realize like, the people that you're around just, I think some of the streams that I follow are not very popular because there's not a lot of people that want to like seriously go into depth about 10 different iterations of the same classical perfume over 100 years, or talk about maybe not the batch code craziness, but talk about, where vetiver comes from and the history of vetiver and the history of colonization of vetiver and how it, comes from the colonization of India and the New World, et cetera. And, really go in depth about that, or really like compare 100 different fragrances with leather notes and really like talk about it for endlessly, night after night after night. And so I would say 0. I mean, really, Persolays, I think, is the channel that has the most views that I watch. And if he doesn't qualify, then no one else I watch would.
I think he's about 15,000, if I recall. So
he's about 15,000. Yeah.
Maybe Eugene.
Eugene is, I think, 9,000 or 11,000. I think he's around 11,000.
Okay. Then yeah, no one would qualify.
it's the amount of subscribers is proportionate to what you have to do to appeal to as wide an audience as possible. So there's certain strategies in order to do that. And unfortunately, in this age where maybe media discussion is not within the attention span or within the interest of people who want things to be very immediate gratification, really easily digestible and quick paced, it just is really difficult to have that kind of following. And that's why I'm impressed that Persilet's, and this could be attributed to the fact that he is really one of a kind in his ability to convey what he does. He has a talent, so if you have a certain talent and insight, and you also know how to read your audience and stuff, there's the potential. But even he hasn't reached 20,000. Maybe he will. He's getting there. He's inching up to it. Ryan, what about you? Are there a lot of 20,000 plus YouTubers that get your motor running, that you check on a daily basis, weekly, however often?
I mean, there are a number that I'm subscribed to, and then we'll check in with as their content goes. I don't watch every video. I think what I appreciate about that space is just sometimes the connection to mainstream fragrances, which I've stopped paying attention to a little bit, and not out of any sort of like snobbishness, but it's just more like I don't have a lot of great like not even like department store-ish like outlets around me to even go and smell a lot of like the most upcoming, mainstream releases. My local Sephora's don't carry a lot to begin with. So I'm a little less clued into that. And I'm always kind of interested in that because for me, fragrance is very much a cultural phenomenon as well as a art form. So as much as I enjoy, the artisanal stuff I've been buying lately, I do enjoy seeing how concepts are developing in the mainstream. And I think while those channels are not devoted to discussing it in those terms, like they're not doing like the history of the fougere as it evolved from the 90s into the 2000s to now, and like how we're at this space with like this very interesting like synthetic lavender that's showing up all over the place and things like that. Like that's not the conversation that's being had. That's the conversation I'm kind of interested in, but it does keep me clued into what people are talking about, what fragrances are getting excited about, people are getting excited about beyond like this, my little like corner of the fragrance community, which tends to be a little bit more artisanal focused, indie focused, and vintage focused. That's kind of like the space I'm in. I do kind of enjoy popping my head out and listening to somebody like rave, for example, about like Bulgari Man in Black, which is actually a fragrance I think is pretty nice for what it is, but is generally not going to happen in the space that I'm in.
Right. Mr. Clean, how about you? What's your relationship to the big timers, the big 20?
Oh yeah, the 20,000 plus. Well, it's pretty much where I started, and then it evolved from there. And
that's often what happens. Yeah.
So this goes now. We're approaching 3 years. It's a little less, 2 3/4 of a year that I really started paying attention and looking stuff at it. It all started with one specific fragrance, just like, oh, let's see if there's anything on YouTube about that. And then it led me to one thing, and like, oh, that's how they talk about it. Let's see how they talk about that category. Somebody else talks about that. Oh, that's a category. That's like, and it started with these big guys, I guess, guys, women, mostly guys, because I look at mostly masculine leaning content, even though the longer I've done this, the more that's evolved and changed. But that's how it started, right? And a lot of those guys I still follow, but I don't pay as much attention to. I'll check in once in a while, I'll like, what are they talking about? You know what? I haven't watched them for a couple weeks. Let's just see how they're talking about this thing. And I might get halfway through a video sometimes. I don't always finish, but I'll give them a like anyway, because I always liked them. So Once in a while, I'll get through one because it does get a little more compelling. But no, I think the majority of the content I watch now, like a lot of you, is under 20,000. But I think those big ones, I like, especially if you start with it, it's like anything else. Like, say, a song that you might think is cheesy, but it takes you back to a time when you started paying attention to music or something like that, right? So I think these channels, they still have value. They bring us in. It's where we go with it, I guess, that ultimately matters.
Right.
So,
right.
And I have to say, when I started to expand beyond those big ones, Ryan was one of the first ones I checked in with and subbed to. And Ryan, we were in the chat one time on one of your videos. You probably don't remember. I think I only commented one time on one of yours. But yeah, this goes back a couple of years. It was on your Giacomo di Giacomo review.
Oh, fantastic.
That was me. That was me saying, oh my God, I'm so happy to hear somebody talk about this. This was my signature scent when I was in the late 80s. That was me.
Oh yeah, I remember that comment. Yes, that's fantastic, and I'm so glad. Oh, that makes me so happy for multiple reasons.
That's
also,
awesome.
Giacomo di Giacomo doesn't get enough love. I love that.
All right, folks, we're gonna look at the chat very briefly here, because I'm gonna be far behind. I'm still at 7:28 here, but there's a lot of great questions coming through. This is a topic that is burgeoning some enthusiasm and some interest. For example, are people on Fragrantica reviewers? I think so. I mean, it depends on the content itself. It depends on the context. I'm probably less inclined to think that a review is just a regurgitation of information that's already pretty much there, just sort of jumbled in a way that looks different. And I think other people just say whether they like something or not, and they explain why. I mean, that's their own personal opinion on it. But I do think that there are people on Fragrantica who are reviewers. I don't think every person who puts a review is really much of a reviewer, but a lot of them are.
Can I just interject for a second?
Oh, of course, please do.
JJ, I really, these days, when I decide to start scrolling through the reviews on Fragrantica for a given fragrance, I'd say 1 out of 4 frags I look at, I find JJ. I find you there with a review in there. Literally, it's about a quarter of the stuff I look at. I'm like, there's JJ.
That's funny. For those who are tuned in who aren't aware, many of you already are, on Fragrantica, my handle is Alpha Iron. So if you do see a review, I have my picture there. You probably would recognize me too, but it's Alpha Iron. And that's where I started posting reviews. And then now I have them all on base notes as well. Yeah, Fragrantica reviewers, I don't know who has a monopoly on what it means to be a fragrance reviewer. Some of them I think are reviews. Some of them I just think people are sharing their opinion. Still others, it's just kind of baseless stuff that I would just scroll past.
Some of the funniest things I've ever read about fragrances I find in Fragrantica reviews, though. Come on, yeah. There's some very freaking hilarious ones.
Yeah, there's some people with some pretty ribald sense of humor on Fragrantica regarding not only fragrances themselves, but opinions on their fellow fragrance enthusiasts and their idea of what is a proper fragrance. There's some funny ones like that. So Alex, are YouTube influencers actually reviewers or fragrance presenters? This is a controversial one,
doesn't it? Depends.
What's that?
Depends on the channel, doesn't it? Because
right.
I mean, because you can have, like, I don't want to paint every large YouTube influencer with a large audience with the same paintbrush. You have who is it? Like the perfumer's apprentice who'll do like an hour-long video on one of the fragrances he loves, or like 30 minutes just talking about it. I think that is actually qualifies as a review.
Yeah.
You know, I don't but some folks are just generally, you know, showing off a bottle collection and are very happy to have a video that is like 3 minutes long, mainly just showing off the video, and half of it is showing the packaging. And I think that is more of a fragrance presentation thing than a full discussion of what that fragrance is.
Well, I think this speaks to the fact that this is very nuanced. You know, you could have somebody who does have an influencer objective, but can also have videos where it's a legit review of a fragrance. Like, you know, I think it is important not to paint YouTubers with such a broad brush. It depends on the individual and what diversity of content they have. And some are more diverse. Some choose to do one video where it is, like you said, Ryan, like this, a lengthy ode to a particular perfume where they review it and discuss it and give the history. And then maybe the next few days later, they may, you know, have some sort of less serious kind of content, or it might have to do with a certain brand that they're collaborating with. You know, it's not, I wouldn't be wise to necessarily write off those who go down that road. Even if it may not be necessarily your favorite thing, which is why there are some YouTubers that I'm subscribed to, and I'm not watching every one of their videos.
Yeah, there are always moments that you can tell are personal and honestly passionate about what they're talking about. The problem is when you get to a point where you need to, I guess, or want to, post every day, you know, a new video every day. That's, I mean, I don't care how good you are and how honest and passionate you are. At that point, it becomes a factory job in a way, doesn't it? You know, it's hard to take the time and really, you know, have a moment with something in a way that a lot of us like to see now, but it's really hard to do that when you're posting every day.
Right. I can't keep up with that kind of generation of content. I just couldn't. It's, to me, I would feel like I would be forcing it. It would be a dilution. Other people can do it. Other people choose to do it. Other people want to do it. But for me and the way I operate, I know that if I were to try to get on every day, first of all, I don't even have the time to anyway. Is that even if I had the time, I really don't. But even if I had the time, I just don't think that the quality would be there. And it requires a certain amount of time and consideration and effort. It's hard enough doing it once a week. Like when I do a video, there's some weeks where it's like, I just do like a little mini video because it's a tough week. And I don't know if I could even do it every week. Things happen in life. So, but I think that there is a motive behind that too, especially when people realize that they're getting monetized. They get seduced by that. They get seduced by the possibility that by driving more content more frequently yields more monetary rewards or maybe even more recognition. But it can have an opposite effect where the overall content can be a little diluted. It just depends on how much time and energy you have. I don't have that.
And there, there's a give and take here, because I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody who starts doing it a lot and realizes, oh, I'm getting monetized. Oh boy, if I do it every day, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No.
And I don't think this is a discussion about good reviewer, bad reviewer.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it isn't. It's about what does it mean to even be a reviewer? Right. Yeah. I don't see that with judgment. I just can identify that I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I just feel like, for me personally, the way I operate, it would just be too challenging, and I'm too much of a nitpicker that I'd probably pull the videos offline half the time anyways, because I'm like, this is kind of pointless. I'm just blathering on and I don't really have much to say because I'm like exhausted. It's full-time work too can make it difficult because you expend so much energy on that, and then I don't know how people do it. You have all of that, and then if you're doing it every day, it is like a part-time job. It's like what you said, Rachel, like it ends up feeling like a job, and except you're not getting paid as much as your full-time job. You're not getting paid very much at all, really. So yeah.
And I just, if it's okay, if I add real quick, I just kind of talking about, how, for me at least, it comes down to a usefulness, right? And that usefulness for me is about authenticity and just a kind of a basic honesty, right? Because if you think about it, we're trying to get information of some kind, whether if it's the person's just opinion or if it's actual, facts about a fragrance, right? And if it's to judge, like for example, JJ, I think you have this amazing palette. And I think since I've watched your stuff and I've read your stuff for so long and really studied it to compare it to my own palette, I have a decent sense of if JJ recommends a fragrance and I feel like I've studied his palette, his preferences enough that I would know by the way he describes it, whether or not I would like to buy that fragrance. And so there's this consistency, honesty, and authenticity to JJ. Like, it's not like one day he's saying one thing because someone puts him on.
Oh, we kind of lost you there a little bit.
Did we? Oh wait, she's coming back. She's coming back to us.
Oh, come back. You have such nice things to say, not only about me, but in general. And I'm grateful for that. Please come back. Okay. So I see it on a delay on my phone too. And also for the audience, the reason why I'm looking over here the entire time is because I'm looking at my phone to watch. But that's in the delay as well. So
yeah, we can't hear you, Rachel.
Oh, we don't hear you. You may need to.
Just dropped, JJ, so you can't see. She just dropped. She's going to join back.
Okay, all right. I will have her. I will get her back.
So wait, so you're watching. So the video on your phone is delayed from the audio.
It is as well. It's delayed by about 10 seconds. So the real time activity I'm not even seeing. So I'm like, I thought she was still there, she was gone, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Hopefully she'll be able to come back. And that's just like a minor blip.
Yeah, hopefully so. What I would say is like when I do this for fun, like anytime this starts to feel like work to me, I don't do it, which is actually why I haven't done a lot of stuff lately. Like there was a spurt where it was very fun for me to be putting out videos regularly, and in the past, year or so, my life has been busy enough that I haven't like been doing it as much. I think I feel bad, for anybody who takes a passion and turns it into work, and then it kind of takes away from the joy of it. That's how I've always felt about things that I really love from a hobbyist perspective. There's a blessing and a curse for that becoming your like primary focus in life. And so for me, this has always been an escapist thing. It's always something I do to get away from the burdens of work and stresses of life. And I would like to keep it that way.
Right.
Ryan, do you think of yourself as a reviewer, or how do you consider yourself when you tell family members about like what you do with YouTube? How do you describe it?
I think I've mostly called myself as an enthusiast. I don't think I've never called myself. I will say that I put up reviews of fragrances, and I do that on occasion, but I don't think of myself as a true reviewer. I think of myself as just kind of an enthusiast who just likes to talk about stuff that he's excited about talking to get more engagement with other folks out there. Sometimes I will intentionally have done a review about a fragrance that I feel like needs some documentation that doesn't really exist. I think there are so many fragrances that come out these days, and so many of them are very badly documented as to what they even are on the internet, that sometimes if there's something I like that is not documented out at all, I'll go out of my way. It doesn't have to be a YouTube video. Sometimes it's just a matter of writing a quick base notes review or a base notes post or something like that, so that there's a Google hit for that is not just like a listing, some sales listing somewhere. But I don't, there are people who do the review thing very, very well. Personally, as we've talked about, there are other people who do very written reviews very well. Some of you might follow the Scented Devil on Instagram. His written reviews are great. He is a very good written reviewer. His reviews on Base Notes are things I consult all the time while looking at vintage fragrances. I think, there are people who do that well. I don't do that with the same level of rigor. In some ways, I've made it a personal mission to be very kind of undisciplined about the way I do videos. Just keep it fun, and also because I kind of, no offense to those who do very polished, like rehearsed videos, but I personally have always responded badly to that level of polish on YouTube. For me, the strength of YouTube was always the feeling of like being in somebody's living room alongside them and like getting that sort of immediate feeling of like, this is just a regular person talking about something. So I've always tried to be very off the cuff, for good and bad. Some of my videos I don't like very much, but I think
Ryan, in my own head, I've always described you. I've always thought of you as like the fireside reviewer. like as if there was you put a fire in the fireplace, you put the chair back, you kick back, and let's just talk now about this. I don't see it so much. Yes,
I've always liked that element as well, Ryan.
But it's like just
it
kicking
feels
back,
like that.
A little fireside chat with Ryan.
Yeah,
that makes me feel good. That's kind of what I like. I think, when I started to do this thing, I looked at Thomas, early Greek, and kind of like the way he talked about fragrance, and I was like, okay, this is it. Like, this is a guy who's doing what I enjoy. He's talking about only what he's enthusiastic about, and he's having a blast doing it, and he's just doing it from his living room, and there's no pretense about it whatsoever. I was like, that's it. And for me, that's always been kind of what I've enjoyed about YouTube. And I when we talk about this trajectory of this platform on the whole, I think it's something that has kind of gradually been lost in all corners of it. It started off very much that way, this sort of like homegrown community feel. And now that, people could spend, like, what was Mr. Beast saying in an interview the other day? Like, he spent like $1 million on like a single YouTube video to like produce it. Like that kind of level of polish is incredible to me compared to where this platform started.
No, Ryan, I agree that your videos, there's a warmth and approachability. I know that you're a little self-effacing in your description of your style, but there is an accessibility to it because it's casual. There's no pretense that you're not like clamoring for attention, and people come to you and they discover you, and that's how it's worked for you. And you haven't fallen for all of the usual trappings of in the attempt to make a huge YouTube channel, and then in the end you ended up having a good following anyhow, because it's not as important to you. It happened organically. And I think that's really admirable. Rachel, I know that you were chatting about some things before we lost you. I don't know if you wanted to pick up on some of the things that you were discussing before we had lost your connection there.
Oh, thanks, guys. I'll try to pick up. It's hard when you get interrupted, but I apologize for the technology flip. I think I was saying that for me, and I think you all were just kind of talking about it also, that authenticity and that just kind of basic truthfulness of a person, because once you get to know a person on YouTube who talks about fragrance, whether they're a self-described reviewer or not, you really can, judge their palate, their taste, their style, as long as they're being authentic and consistent and truthful, right, to your own, and that really does help you learn. And then another thing that Ryan just kind of reminded me of is that, to be honest, and we're learning more and more about this, especially with the work that like people like Christophe Laudamiel, et cetera, are doing, is that the industry, is purposefully opaque, right? Unlike any other art really in the world about what's actually in the bottles, you know? And so that does actually breed this whole kind of middleman, right, of explainers, you know, because they don't actually list what's in the bottle. They list impressions, right? And I understand that we're still like, we're basically at the very, very beginning of understanding the science of smell. And so that is part of it, of course, that we don't actually understand how that functions yet. But at the same time, there's quite literally a list of ingredients that goes in every bottle that we don't know, right? And that's a decision. That's a specific decision. And that gets into a lot of politics and stuff like that of industry and labor and wages and all kinds of stuff. But you know, that there is an opacity to this industry that demands a kind of interpretation and a kind of, you really have to dig for facts and for just basic truths. And I think that engenders all these kind of layers of misunderstanding and understanding. And so it can make it a little bit more fun, or it can make it very frustrating. But in any case, you really do need to find trusted voices. Like JJ, who is one of the first people I found and who I've just been a huge fan of forever. And I have some of my favorite fragrances in the entire world I found because JJ was talking about them, and they just sounded like, the way he writes is like poetry. And they just, you know, they make your heart and your mind bloom a little bit hearing JJ talking about them. And then you actually try them and they're just as beautiful. And that's quite rare. So
yeah, I want to take a moment to also blow some smoke up JJ's. No, here's what's interesting about the way JJ reviews that I think most of us love and appreciate so much. JJ has this encyclopedic knowledge, and he can do, you know, like, I'm just going to throw this out there, so you're not doing it like he is, JJ, but, you know, like Aaron Terrence here, like taking a note, talking about specific notes, right? You're not, you're very different. No, let's not confuse the
Thank you for the reassurance.
Yeah, yes. But in that way, but then you also have this thing that you tack onto it that is about what it evokes, the feeling. You put us in a time and a place, and that you can take this technical sort of encyclopedic knowledge and tack it onto this very emotional, descriptive place is your, that's your superpower.
Well, I'm humbled. I'm really humbled. I like to write, and the advantage that I had is that I studied to be an independent perfumer. So I've been able to kind of look at the behind the scenes a little bit by sampling and analyzing so many raw materials. So if often, you know, if somebody has a question as to whether or not the notes pyramid does really reflect what's in it, I'm often impressed by how the notes pyramid can be accurate at times. And then other times it's fascinating to me that I'll detect things and I know for certain are there just from my experience that are just not given the attention for whatever reason, whether it's conceptual or not. So I do have that advantage from studying perfume making, and I try not to take that for granted. But mostly it's just, I want to not, it's like what I said last week on last week's live stream. The importance for me as far as reviewing a fragrance is not to just merely analyze it and judge it, but to observe it. It's just observe it moment by moment, which reminds me that I have the first impressions and maybe we should revisit them, but that's so important to me. And I don't think everybody has that style, and that's fine. But that's what's really important to me, because you get into the experience of the fragrance, what it does to you in ways that maybe it's not necessarily going to get you attention or validation. Maybe it's not going to make you popular, but really, does it matter in the end when it gives you a feeling, and that feeling is profound? If it takes you to a memory that maybe nothing else in life facilitates, you know, you get to visit sensations or memories and stuff. And I think that's just one of the most fascinating aspects of fragrance. These first impressions, because we're just a little over an hour. Wake Up the World, I'll smell that quickly. It dries down very differently from Minotaur. It has a very modern dry down, which even more so makes me prefer Minotaur over that one. So that one is pretty much out. What I am noticing through some whiffs and wafts on this hand is how lovely this Bel Antonio is.
Whiffs and wafts. How come nobody has named their channel that yet?
Because there's already wafts from the loft.
Yeah, they cornered.
They own wafts.
They grabbed that waft. They grabbed the waft. Redolescence grabbed redolent. They cornered that verbiage.
Sorry, JJ, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah, of course.
I'm so sorry. So my little guy, he ran to the door and jammed his little pinky. So I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to go do some snuggling and some mama duties. But I just wanted to say goodnight. I'm sorry I can't stay, but he's, he needs mama. So I gotta run.
That takes priority without hesitation. And I yes, tend to him and snuggle and assure him that he'll be okay. And thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you for so much. And like anytime, and I was going to mention just real quick, I just got these acro samples in the mail. So when I'm done with them, if you want me to include them in your package, which I'm still sending, I promise. It's just, I've been so busy with school and stuff, but let me know and I will throw them in there.
Oh, that would be brilliant. And then I'll put something together in return. We'll just go back and forth.
We'll go back and forth.
All right.
Cool.
Take care.
Rachel, I
Bye,
love when I
guys.
get to see you, and especially when I get to share the screen with you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Clean. You're so awesome. And Mr. Clean and Ryan, I can't wait to get to know you guys better. And thank you so much. Same for me.
It was lovely, Rachel. Have a good night. Take care.
Take care, Rachel. Bye. I think that Bel Antonio is my favorite so far, but wait. No, but the Sweet Williams smell, it dried down so nice too. It's like a powdery cosmetic musk.
Okay.
But it's something like Velvione or something or Cosmone. So it's a tie. It's still a tie.
Part of me is envious when you smell it and you name
I know. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I know, and I do. Which is what Aaron Terrence Hughes and I have in common.
I trust that you know what you're, but I would say what I was going to say is the other part of it is like, part of me is glad that I can't do that. Cause sometimes when it's interesting with a perfume, like, and you're starting out and you're smelling things, you don't know exactly what you're smelling. You're kind of figuring it out for the first time. And then eventually like you figure out, oh, that's what Norlimbinol smells like. And then it's all you can smell. Or like you try some raw materials and you try that one thing, or it's like one particular isolate that you smell, and then it's like anytime it shows up, you're like, oh, it's that, and it kind of breaks the spell a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. No, at first I thought it would demystify things, but over time, when you revisit perfume after doing it, you don't necessarily pay attention all the time to whatever compounds or materials that you can detect. It kind of is more like a weaving in and out. And maybe this is just my brain's capacity for it, but I imagine, a lot of other, perfume enthusiasts come perfumers can do the same thing. I think John Beeble can do that because he was a perfume enthusiast and then he became a self-taught perfumer, that you can kind of compartmentalize it. Like, you can set that aside, or at least I can detect those things, but it doesn't reduce the fragrance to those elements, because then I can go back to like more the whimsical kind of like imagination and just how it makes me feel rather than analyzing it, that's why it's a balance, because now when I smell it, I just think of just like this comfortable fluffy bed that's made out of like mimosa blossoms. and that's not any material. I mean, there may not even be mimosa in it, but that's just how it's making me feel. So I wouldn't worry about, I mean, unless you have an interest in perfume making, and if you don't, then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and JJ, you know, some of you know, I mess around with it. I say mess around. I'll say fuck around, because I haven't done anything with it, but I've spent a lot of time with. Boy, you know, it gets expensive. A lot of money spent on raw materials, and seeing what they all do and stuff, and I do it. That is definitely changed the way I smell fragrances now to some extent, but it certainly hasn't ruined it. What it's done is, like, I think for like the average person who just loves perfume and maybe, you know, has a moderate collection, they go to Fragrantica, they look at the notes, but we all know now there's so many things not listed.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And
right.
and they think, oh, this must be what blah 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 smells like. No, the thing they're smelling is the amberwood that they loaded in,
Yeah.
or you know, something like that that's not listed, right?
Right.
So it's allowed me to actually pull out and pinpoint some of the things, usually more for the negative. If I'm really enjoying something, I almost don't even care. It's when something hits me wrong or annoys me that I'm determined to know what that aroma chemical is, because I want to try to avoid it from here on out.
Yeah, yeah. So Maddie S54, the problem with ATH is he name drops the ingredients to sound knowledgeable, but half the time he's wrong or guessing. It's best to be able to describe things without the techno babble. I don't want to be raked through the coals, but I probably will anyways. If there are any ATH fans, I have caught him on several occasions where he is analyzing or critiquing or doing a review on a certain fragrance, and he mentions something where I'm just puzzled as to why that's standing out for him, because just from my knowledge of that particular fragrance and its composition, and why would he detect that particular, note, or not note, but compound, and the compound, and then he'll explain the compound. And I'm like, no, that's not what that's used for in perfumery. But it's just one of those situations where it's, let go and let God. Like, I'm not going to argue it. That's just the world that we live in. There are people with large personalities on the internet, and you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. Even me and Ryan and Mr. Clean, you take everything you say with a grain of salt. Nobody is omniscient. We all make mistakes. So some of us are making a whole fuck ton of them. Hey there, Kareem. Thank you for tuning in. So what I wanted to do, there's another comment too. Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're a perfumer, those things do stick out immediately. And that's what I've had to unlearn, is to kind of pay less attention to those things, unless they overtake a composition, which a lot of like more modern releases. I mean, I'll tell you that there are modern releases where 80% of the fragrance is Isoe Super Galaxolide and Hedione with a tiny bit of other stuff. I wanted to take it back to Dan and Mr. Smelly had the stream this past weekend, and a little bit of this was discussed as about what does it take to review, what is needed, what are the necessary requirements for reviewing. And some of the opinions were, it's necessary to have a full bottle because the atomizer is better quality than a sample atomizer. There was another statement that one cannot do a review based on just 3 milliliters of a sample. Do you necessarily think that there should be any sort of quantity, or I don't know, that really eluded me, that there are some people who really think that there's something physical and a quantity of that physical stuff that's needed in order to do a review or to discuss a fragrance. What do you think about that, Ryan?
I Well, I think it's it's there's a 4-letter word for it. I think I mean I think it's very true that you can have a more in-depth experience of a fragrance if you've worn a lot of it and have gotten to know it over a period of time. And I think nobody should argue that there is not a difference between a fragrance you've sampled for a few days and a fragrance you may have known for years. And I think there's obviously a different range in experience there, and there's a different quality of review. But in the same way that we don't expect our movie critics to have seen a movie 5 times over the space of 2 years before they write a piece reflecting whether they think it's any good or not, I think it's ridiculous to expect that a perfume reviewer would have spent 6 months with a fragrance, have gone through 10 milliliters of it over that time in different weather conditions before writing down their impressions and thoughts on it. I think we all get fragrances wrong sometimes, in the sense that we can judge a fragrance at first sniff and then come back to it and find something different in it. I've certainly done that. It's very rare that I've done like a full 180 on things, but it still has happened. There were things that I disliked initially and have come around to say, oh, this is actually appealing to me. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean my initial reaction was any less valid. There's actually some value in documenting that, and also then documenting the second take. And I think that's one thing folks don't appreciate, is that these opinions are by nature not static. I rewrite reviews I've posted on Base Notes all the time, because you might re-encounter something and change your mind, or often I like things less than I did initially. I mean, that's the other piece of it. It's more often the case that I will have initially felt pretty strongly about a fragrance and found over time that, well, I found something that kind of I didn't think I would find that does this concept a lot better than this fragrance. And there's just that it's all going to change depending on context. Reviewing is not something you do in a vacuum. There's no definitive, canonical, objective opinion you're ever going to get about a fragrance. This is a very subjective, even more so than other art forms. This is a very subjective, personal space, and leaning into the personal moment in time quality of perfume as experience, and then also as a facet of reviewing perfume, I think is important.
Agreed. Philip 3 Alex, JJ, it would be nice to know more about your fragrance training. Perhaps another time I can get into it a little bit. It's something that I put on the very far back burner because it's a very expensive and time-consuming hobby. I imagine if I ever return to it, you'd be seeing a lot less of me because I wouldn't have time to have a full-time job, do this stuff, and do perfume making. But I'd be happy to chat about it.
That would be a great concept for a specific episode.
Yeah. Oh yeah. To talk, and perhaps an episode where I invite 1 or 2 individuals who have studied perfume making independently or otherwise. So, Mr. Clean, did you have a few different viewpoints on that? Where
So, as somebody, like I said when we started, I come from the chat. I'm somebody who's more of got into watching and wanting to hear what people had to say. There's been a trend lately for a lot of first impressions. Now, JJ, you're sort of doing a first impression, but here's the great thing about the first impression. This is why it's not truly just a first impression. Most first impression videos I see are like literally spray it on. This is what I think right now. Well, and then we never fucking hear from them again. That annoys the shit out of me. Here's what you're able to do. You do like a 2-hour episode here. You spray it on at the beginning. You check in on it halfway through, and you check in on it at the end. We get into the dry down. So, yes, first impression, but first impression with a lot more nuance, right? I think first impression videos, I have a love-hate with. And I do think first impressions have become a trend lately.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's fun to see an unboxing and spray it on and what you first think, right? But I never buy a perfume based on that immediate reaction. I typically don't. I mean, I probably have, and then I've probably regretted it, right? So I want to buy perfumes that I know 2-4 hours in, that I love it. Yeah, God, it's freaking awesome if I really love it when I first spray it on, but we know it's not going to be the same even after 20 minutes. So those first impressions that never come back to that first spray annoy the shit out of me. That's a trend in reviews that I would like to see go away. I want to see the first impressions when they first spray it, come back to it a couple hours later. Okay. And then, you know, if you want to do a follow-up video, now you've worn it a few times, great. But you don't need anything more than something this size to wear it enough to get a valid opinion on what you think of it, right?
Right. 1 milliliter gets you about 6 to 8 sprays. 6 to 8 sprays should be more than enough. You don't need to spray, you know, every corner of your body. You could, I have reviewed fragrances by applying about 2-3 times just on the top of my hand. I have done variations where I'll see how it dries down on different parts of my skin. I don't think that's always necessary, but it's an interesting sort of experiment. And I just don't, I think it's just absurd to think that somebody can't give a proper review of something if they've been able to examine the top notes, the heart, and the dry down, and then given at minimum a second wear. And like you said, Ryan, it may be a different type of review than if you were to one day decide a fragrance that you have worn and loved for several years. You're going to sit down and do a review because you're going to have a very different attitude towards it because you have history with it. And you'll even notice that with some of the reviews that I've done. Like, if it's a fragrance that has been dear to me for a long time and I've worn it many times, I'm going to express myself differently. But it doesn't necessarily mean that is a more proper review. It's just a review based on a very different experience with that fragrance. It speaks to the subjectivity of it. It's always
a review that has memory, history. You know, that's awesome. That's really cool. But they can't all be that realistically. No,
right. Because I can't have a memory with 500 fragrance. I'm almost at 500 reviews. I don't have that relationship with that many fragrances. And even somebody like, do you think that Luca Turin has a bottle of every fragrance that he's reviewed, or even had more than a sample of it? A lot of reviewers, they work with samples. That's what you do.
And that makes sense. I think, you know, one thing that I think is perhaps, and if I was better disciplined about this, maybe I would always factor this in whenever I talk about a fragrance, is differences in climate and season and how that affects how a fragrance wear. In my personal experience, that can be pretty dramatic depending on the type of composition, whether I'm wearing it in the cold of winter or in warmer climate. But, you know, there's part of it is just like, if this was my academic field of study and I was actually putting something in like an official record somewhere, I would treat this with like a level of scholarly intensity that is perhaps not warranted, given the fact that I'm an enthusiast, just kind of like excitedly talking about things that I've discovered. I tend to talk about stuff I like more often than stuff that I don't. You get get some reactions from me about stuff that I clearly panned, but it's very rare that I'm going to come out here and just pan something aggressively. Anyway, I don't know. What do you know? The seasonality.
On that note, if we no pun intended, really, but On that note, this is something I've brought up in the past, is the negative review. And this is something that I actually do feel like is missing from a lot of fragrance reviews. I'm not a negative person. I don't need a bunch of negativity. That said, I am way more willing to trust and get into the reviewer when he or she is liking something, if I know that he or she also hates something and has made it clear. Like if I know they think something is disgusting or just off-putting, when they tell me something is beautiful, I'm way more prone to believe them.
And that's actually the virtue sometimes, like Per Soleil's does a lot of first impression streams, right? And sometimes he does so many that I only watch a small percentage of his videos because I don't have all the time to watch every single one he does, but he's very regular about doing that. And I do appreciate the ones where he does first impressions and it's very clear that he just hates the perfume. And it gives credit. It gives weight to when he does a first impression and he's enjoying the perfume. And again, we've kind of talked about the limits of first impressions, but he's always very good about like giving his.
He's a great example.
Yeah. I agree with that. I have generally, I'm not shy about my opinions. If anybody asks me about a perfume on this thing, I'll happily slag anything. The only reason I haven't done videos about that in detail is often when I dislike something, I don't have interesting things to say about it. And that I think that's where I feel I get limited. It's like, oh, this is very harsh and it falls apart and I don't enjoy it. And okay, there we go. And like, it's very hard. Like sometimes things are bad in an interesting way. And one of the fragrances I brought up very recently on one of JJ's other streams that I don't like at all is Beaufort London's Tenaire, and I can't remember what year it is, which is like this smoky, dark, aquatic thing with a gunpowder cord that just dries down to like a Calone, like tidal wave. And I think it is just honestly kind of like a disaster of a thing that's really fascinating because I love the gunpowder cord in it, but I hate everything else about it. I could talk about that for a bit because it's an interesting fragrance that has that sort of like an appeal and repulsion to me, but it's very rare that a fragrance that I dislike has that like level of fascination that's like, I want to keep smelling this even though I detest it. I don't know.
That's true. That's a good point, because you know what, we've all blind bought stuff and then been like, what the fuck? Come on.
With other people's recommendation as well.
So then we don't spend time with it, and it's not something worthy of talking about. I've got a stack of shit I need to get rid of.
What was your worst blind buy? What was the blind buy?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good topic question, and I don't know what it is offhand. Because worst blind buy might imply a price point, right?
That's fair.
Right, the amount of money spent on something that you absolutely can't stand.
Highest value spent based on least liking, whatever that scale is. So I'm not sure what that is. That's something I'll come back to at some point.
Yeah, I've had to be very careful these days. I mean, I've reached a plateau of full bottle. At this point, I have a museum of scent, and I've had to kind of assess how I'm going to curate that in the future. This is not a normal size collection. So anything new that comes in, I really have to sample it first. And it's a very particular process too. Like it has to be something that I'm just head over heels over. Nothing that I really like. I mean, what's the point to really anything that I wanted as sort of like a reference, a historic reference that I can visit as often as I humanly can. I already have all that I need. It's like I don't really need to introduce much more into it. So my whole process is entirely different now. It's really, I've reached a limit. I've reached an exhausting limit. Like,
so,
even
well,
things.
Ryan, you asked the question too. Like, do you have one that comes to mind? I have to say, Margie had one come to mind right away. She put in the chat, and I'm sure there's a few people here who right away they know exactly the one it is. I don't know what mine. I don't know what. Do you have yours, Ryan? Do you know what yours is?
Not off the top of my head. I
remember mine. Sorry, Ryan, but I just want, while it's still in my head, Bentley for Men Intense. That one. I bought it and I was like, I'm not feeling it. Why is everybody in love with this?
Generally, for me, I like if I blind buy something that people are talking highly about, and then I get it, and it's loaded with ambroxan and or amberwood, some sort of similar chemical. Like I'm out. Like it's done. That's all I can smell. And people will be like, I'll listen to reviews, and they're like, oh, the neroli, the orange blossom, the cedarwood, blah blah. I get it. I'm like, it's just fucking amberwood. What are you talking about?
Let's talk about that for a little bit, because that's a very interesting thing too when people are reviewing or discussing a fragrance, and it's always disconcerting when they expound upon their belief that they're picking up what is really just a fantasy note. Like, oh, the poppy in the heart, it really stands out in this fragrance. I remember this poppy note. Now, poppies don't have really much of a scent to speak of. It's a fantasy note. The only scent you can get from a poppy is if you literally shove your nose in it, and it's a vaguely leafy herbaceous note that is nondescript. So I'm noticing that too, where people are so reliant on this notes pyramid, and they don't realize that some of the notes that are listed are fantasy notes. They're like flowers like camellia, which I think there's only like one variety that actually has a smell. So the likelihood that person's ever actually smelled it is so low. That I find fascinating too. It's like they become so stuck on that notes pyramid as a guide that they're not following their nose first. Like I think that people use that a great deal as a crutch, and I know even I have as well, where I'm at a loss, where it's like, what is this that I'm smelling? And then I turn to the notes pyramid. But it's really interesting how people will use that to a fault.
The two things that annoy me the most with reviewers: the note pyramid, relying on Fragrantica, just going right to the pyramid right off that, and the marketing language and or the packaging and like the thing that sucks them in. Look, and those are things we can talk about, but I see it influence the way people talk about the actual fragrance all the time. Here's one of the things that drives me crazy. Look, I'm willing to accept that. There's Margie's worst blind buy. Have either of you smelled that one?
Oh yeah, that one's pretty bad. I have a tough time with Nasamato. The only one that I like from the line is the Absinthe, which curiously enough is the one that everybody thinks is the boring scent, and I think it's quite nice. But yeah, Narcotic Venus is not pleasant to my nose. Blamage is hideous. Sorry. I'm pretty opinionated about Nasamato and the other.
No, it's all good. Again, we should be opinionated about it. We should be. Like, again,
so
all the more reason to trust someone.
While we're still shit talking Nasamato, hold on. I love boozy fragrances. I like booze notes in fragrances, but Baranda, or however you say it, is just the most nauseating thing in the universe. It is absolutely one of my most hated fragrances.
One way ticket to the vomitorium. It is like it just smells like vomit chunks to my nose. Like something about it smells vomity. A lot of boozy scents do that to me, like where they just they don't smell the way that maybe they're intended. My nose just doesn't appreciate those kinds of accords. Edouard de Lubin was mentioned as well. It's the same thing. It's just
now that one, the boozy element of that, I like Edol. Edol's dry down is my problem, the ebony wood. But anyway,
yeah,
we interrupted you as you were about to go off about.
Oh, to go off on Nasamato. It's just my opinion. Opinions, they only mean so much. I found, and what is the name of the perfumer? Alexandro. Wait, who is the name of that perfumer? Some gentleman, respectfully, crams a lot in to make a statement. And it just comes off as lacking any nuance. And the same thing is for the Orto Parisi line. And I know that I'm going to have plenty of detractors. We have 47 people viewing right now. I'm sure some of them are fans of either or both houses, but they're just too front-loaded, and there's just too much of too many things going on for me to feel like there's any experience of spaces in between the elements. That's all. I like the absinthe one. I had that. That was the first one I bought years ago, and that was the only one I got. And it's just like a nice wormwood with cashmeran in the dry down.
I would say I think I've only smelled one Nasamato ever. But it seems like it's this premier niche frag that gets the most hate at the same time, in a way. Like I hear a lot of people dish on it, yet it seems to be doing just fine somehow.
It cracks me up, though. And I think that people are sometimes detecting what they think is this is what I think the point that I'm trying to make, and just forgive me, I'm a little brain foggy at the moment, but it really matters just how many things you've smelled and for how long over a period of time before you start to get more experience. And I think there are some people who go out there like, I'm the hottest new reviewer in town, and they may not have smelled that much, and that's okay, because there's a market for people who are learning and growing along with everyone else. But as long as there's that self-awareness, I can respect that. If there isn't that level of self-awareness, and they have like a big old case of Dunning-Kruger, and they think that they already have had it all figured out since before they left the womb, it comes off as just so, I don't know. And there's a lot of that too. And those are the reviewers that are just not necessarily the reliable ones, because you're trying to figure out what exactly is this person trying to say? Are they really smelling it? And sometimes I wonder what they're smelling. Like, what are they smelling? The same fragrance that I know? I mean, that they're taught. I mean,
I go through this all the time too. When I have bought stuff based on reviews and then I sprayed it, I'm like, what the fuck? This is not the review I heard. What? Right. What?
But I guess that's going to happen. That's going to happen if somebody just has a different, a different experience with a fragrance. But it's just hard to describe without saying that you read something and it sort of plays out as like one thing, but either in my case, like I know that whatever they're describing doesn't really fit with what I would think most people, I'm not just talking about myself, but with what most people would describe it. It makes me confused and wondering what is the intention? Like, what's the intention behind this? Like, do you want to be part of this whole thing and you're trying too hard to make it happen? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just kind of going off on a really horrible tangent at this point.
Steve,
but
that makes me think of the thing I was going to bring up a moment ago. the other, besides the reliance on the note pyramid and Fragrantica, I often see people get caught up in the marketing and the way a fragrance is presented, and they start talking about it in a review. They are smelling and they're reviewing it with their version of the language that's used to market it. I see it all the time, and I see it actually with some respected reviewers here on YouTube, people in this chat really like to watch sometimes. I have watched numerous, I mean, I was going to bring this up earlier. Yet some of you on Smelly Stream have heard me a couple times just talk about how that I've really come to really love Ganymede. I don't have a bottle yet. It's one that I think I need to buy. I should own that. I like it that much. Look, we don't all have to like the same stuff. Mm-hmm. I understand if you don't like it, but I don't get how many times I've watched a review for it, listened to somebody talk about it, where they're like, oh, yes, it's evoking like the outer space and it's the moon. It's like the minerals on the moon of it. They're just talking about the stuff that's in the marketing.
Right. They're regurgitating ad copy. I see it all the time.
Because if you didn't know that's what it's at, if you were just giving a blind a decant with no label and you were asked to wear it a few times and give your impression, would you talk about outer space and the moons of Jupiter? No, you wouldn't. So
I don't like reading ad copy. I really don't. I think it's not useful to me. I'll like read it long after I've figured out the fragrance on my own, and I'll compare notes. And often it's like, what? That's what they're going for? I'm not feeling that, but they yeah. Ad copy is hilarious at times. And often doesn't really match my own impression of a fragrance. Like, for example, when I sample Ganymede, outer space was the furthest thing from my mind. Like, I really just felt like I was in a brand new car. Like, but that happens. But people have different intentions, and they all have a place in their own lane of intentions. There's going to be some people who they want to jump on the bandwagon and get some clout, and hooray for them. I don't even try to. I mean, with those individuals, I don't even really see them as somebody who really is trying to have credibility for that, because their audience is not.
There are people in this category I've witnessed do this, in the category that people who watch JJ also watch. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to name names.
Now I'm thinking back in my back catalog of videos, but I would say I think it happens. It happens a lot, and it's why I try to avoid reading ad copy. Sometimes, as part of looking for fragrance, that you end up reading the ad copy. I think it happens with fragrance names themselves too. Sometimes I wish we could experience fragrances without the way the names focus our experience of the scent too, because names can be just as misleading as the ad copy. Tell
me, oud wood. Where the fuck is the oud, right? People get caught up. Oh, it sucks because it doesn't smell like oud. No, forget the name. Forget the name for a second. Just smell it as a fragrance.
Right. So there was one fragrance that I got in a swap recently, and it's gone now. That's how I didn't have it very long, but JJ and I had talked a little bit about it. It was Carner Barcelona Palo Santo, which I don't think smells anything like Palo Santo. It's a decent fragrance on its own terms. I had to like really squint to see why they would ever even describe it as Palo Santo, because it's I don't know. I know what Palo Santo smells like. I burn Palo Santo.
Palo Santo doesn't really have the kind of resinous sweetness that fragrance has. Like, it's Palo Santo has this dry, like medicinal kind of weird, minty. It's like it's its own thing. It's so unique to itself. I've experienced so few fragrances that really capture Palo Santo. Like fragrances that listed as a note, oh, no, I don't detect it. Every time it ends up being listed. But that one is a good example, and there's many like that. You can't really base it on the name itself, and let that be your guide. There are many examples of that. I'm thinking whole houses that have a tendency to name something after a certain note or flower or wood or what have you, and the fragrance, it ends up being just this supported note in the background, kind of like it's like underpinned, but it's not front and center. You're getting more of something else. And I'm trying to think of a good example of a house where it's like, okay, not quite.
I don't have a lot of experience with them, but if you're talking about a house that often lists one note, again, you guys might know it better, but it makes me think of Memo, like the leather, because they've got all the leathers, right?
So
opinions on the Memo leathers.
So I can't weigh in for sure on Memo beyond, and I'm sorry anyone watching who likes Memo, but I was at a store in Santa Fe sampling the Memo line, and I tried about 4 of them, and I just thought they were all very cheap smelling, and I wanted nothing to do with the rest of the line. So while we're talking openly about fragrances we dislike, I didn't get along with the House of Memo at all. But that's all I can say.
I had a tough time with that house as well, and I'm trying to open up my YouTube on my phone again. I'm sorry. I'm looking all different places except at you guys because I'm trying to watch you guys over here. Memo, to me, a lot of the dry downs seem very similar and anticlimactic. That's what I'll say about that. It's just that another example of serious front loading. Like it's all front loaded. It all seems promising, and then before you know it, it's just not fun anymore. I think the ones that I liked were the ones that were less talked about. I kind of liked the Irish leather and the Italian leather because I like kind of they had these herbaceous kind of openings, but all the dry downs, all of them were quite similar.
Maybe it's the same leather accord, I guess.
The same kind of leather accord. Like if you're going to have all these different leathers, at least like, push it in some different, I mean, there's many different directions you can go, especially if you're highlighting a certain geography. I mean, people understand that a Spanish leather would be different from a Russian leather. So I would think that they would have the wherewithal to do the same. So that's not really a favorite house of mine. And everything else seems nice, but definitely not worth the price point. But the bottles are really nice looking. I always thought the bottles were nice looking, but that's not enough.
Well, that's more than we can say for Roja. So sorry. I'm getting cranky here. But I would say,
it's cranky Ryan night.
Yeah.
It's okay to be cranky here. Let this be a safe space for crankiness. We can be cranky as long as we still have a little bit of tact and finesse. It's fine to get a little cantankerous,
Sure. But I mean, I think that there are many fragrances that have oud in the name while we're just talking about it, since oud wood was brought up, that meaningfully in no way have even what I would call a synthetic oud accord in it. It just is just in the name. And you will see reviewers strive to identify something in it as oud, regardless of whether there's it could just, it's in many cases just like a synth woody backing.
It's usually amberwood.
Yeah.
Look, I'm always gonna harp on amberwood because I fucking hate it so much. but it gets dropped in as a stand-in for oud all the time. I don't understand.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true, and it's very little of what constitutes like what should or probably what is it I would expect from an oud profile. I have a tough relationship with oud notes in fragrance to begin with. I have very few fragrances that feature it. Um, Oddly enough, the most barbaric one that I find fascinating and actually enjoy wearing it is the Oud Cuir d'Arabie from Montal. It's like one of two different Montal
There's a
fragrances that
Montal
I
you
have.
like wearing.
There's two. I like that, and I like full incense. I have just two bottles in my entire collection, and I like it because it's just so unabashedly dirty and funky in that opening. It just fascinates me. I got a cheap enough bottle, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna add this because like, I just am so fascinated with just how outrageous it is. But it is kind of like a quality leather dry down though. Like it's like one of the few examples of a Montal that dries down, and I can get into it, that it doesn't terrify me.
See, now I'm intrigued. If there are two Montals that JJ really likes and wants to wear, now I need to hunt them down.
You can have my I have Cuir d'Arabie, the smaller thing. I'm never gonna wear it. I agree with JJ that it's actually a very for that house. It's not what you would expect at all. The leather accord in it is very nice. It's a bit for no matter what perfume I like, at a certain point, I am a utilitarian when it comes to perfumes I wear, and if I can't really wear it in polite society without being judged harshly, I won't. And that is a beast of a stank leather fragrance. But I admire its conviction, and I admire its fortitude. It is just
fortitude. That's a good word for it. It is fortitude. This is not something that I would spray and leave the house right away. It is that profound in its skank. It's like blue cheese, stinky armpit, stinky, like sebaceous, like weird. I don't know. It's just all those things rolled up in one, and it's fascinating. And
I think this is the first time I've heard the word sebaceous used in a perfume review.
Oh, I use that a lot because there's a lot of things that are sebaceous that remind me of like skin oils.
Yeah.
Like costus root to me, it reminds me of
costus root is weird.
I love costus root though. I love it.
Though. It's
It reminds me of like the smell of like if you touch your scalp. And like it's sebum. It smells. Yeah. Some people think it smells like wet dog. I don't really get that as much, but it's just the smell of skin oils, and it works so well in these musky, vanillic, animalic kind of accords. Like it goes well with sweetness, it goes well with flowers, and it goes well with musk. In fact, Animalis, the Animalis base that is compounded by Cinnarome, has costus. These days, it's a costus replacer, which smells 99.9% like natural costus. They have it down to a T. But that Animalis base is what gives Kouros its panache. It's that Animalis. There's a lot of it. And you also have Animalis along with a Tonquitone base in the wonderful Kiehl's Musk. So the costus effects are really a big part of that modern musk. Even it's been used to reconstruct the deer musk vibe, since deer musk has been forbidden for many, many years. But I like it. I like it a lot. There's one really great fragrance that has a pretty significant costus note, and it's L'Adrienne by Miller Harris. And that's a costus amber. And that's one of my favorite uses of vanilla in a fragrance, because it doesn't remind you of vanilla. It's like it turns into something else because of that costus. And another really good one, Vierge Terreos from État Libre d'Orange, is costus with tuberose.
Which one?
Vierge et Terreos. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Vierge et Terreos. I can type it. Give me a moment. I will type it.
I was going to say, I'm from the way you're pronouncing it, I wouldn't be able to spell it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, you know,
Toreros.
This is when I'm in the chat or something and fragrance are mentioned, especially when they're French and nobody writes it down. I'm like, wait, what the fuck is that? I don't know what you're saying.
I put it into the chat here. So
okay, I see it right there. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That at some point in the near future, when I do a tuberose week, that will certainly feature. I'm not sure if I could do a whole costus week. I don't think there are enough costus centered fragrances that I could do a whole week for, but the ones that I have, I love them to pieces.
Do you have the Rogue tuberose? Have you smelled that one?
I need to make
there's tuberose. It's tuberose in the name, so
I need to make a confession, and I'm sure people will eviscerate me for this, or not eviscerate, but they'll admonish me. We'll say that. I have never smelled any Rogue perfume.
Get the Discovery set, $45 American. It's
no, somebody just give me
14.
samples.
14.
I don't want to pay for them.
No. I owe JJ a package anyway. I've got a bunch of Rogue stuff just gathering dust in my drawer. If you want to try some of the line, I can send that to you.
I can't just go on much further without an opinion. All I need are like samples, and then I can give my opinions on them. I just am like so stingy about paying for stuff now. Like I don't even want to pay for like samplers. Like I'll do trades.
I understand. I like Tabac Vert a decent bit, which is a good soap.
I have Tabac Vert. Love it.
Yep, it's very nice. I'm trying to remember. There's the which is the one that's supposed to have all the animalic notes in it. I can't remember. That one I liked a lot. I'll send it to you.
Also, the Fougère. So I have the Tabac Vert
and the Fougère. What's the? Is that the Fougère Laub. That's like the green Irish tweed, but better. Right?
Yeah, it's really it's nice. It's for me, it's not beastly. It's moderate in a good way. You know, it's not crazy pumping off, but it does what it does really well. It's I think it's really gorgeous.
I think it's very nice. I think I've said before, maybe not in a video anywhere, but I've said it to somebody at some point, that if you were to get green Irish tweed today, you would do better to buy Fougère Laub.
The Fougère Laub.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it, of course, we know, we say these things, and just so everybody knows, all the perfumes we all love and wear are a combination of naturals and aroma chemicals. But this smells more natural. It does, honestly, than say a green Irish tweed. It smells much more, you know, a little less chemical.
Well, that would make sense, because that's his whole premise, is he uses like a great deal of naturals, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I'd love to experience
there. Of course,
them.
the chemies are in there, but it does coming a little more natural.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but I think that even when you're using a fair amount of naturals, the aroma chems are important to give the structure to a fragrance. The natural perfumes, I have a very tough time enjoying natural perfumes. There are some exceptions, but there are a lot of natural perfumes seem to fall apart in the end product, because there is so many little mini perfumes in the perfume that it gets too muddled. And there is a limited palette for fixatives, especially affordable fixatives. So if you're a natural perfumer and you don't have a gigantic budget, then you're left with just so few fixatives. Like, it's going to be vetiver, patchouli, labdanum. Not much more than that. I mean, there's a few others that you could use, but you can't use them in the quantity that you could use those three. So a lot of them end up smelling similar in the dry down. So folks are talking about Chypre palatin. So MDCI, is that the name of the house? I've been afraid to even encounter that house just because I hear so much about how, formulations have changed. Well, here's one right here from Dunk, the 2012 bottle, is going to be is going to be superior to like a current bottle and so on and so forth. And when I hear so much of that, I just throw my hands up in the air and then hope that somebody can maybe, I don't know, send me a sample of something that they think is a good version of it. That's a house where I don't have a full bottle. Because I get confused by that. So I get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed when there's so much discussion about changes and formulations and stuff. I mean, I could probably just sample the current versions and just make a judgment based on that. Are either of you familiar with the MDCIs? There's many of them.
I think I have a decant over here that I've never sprayed. Hold on, let me see.
But for some reason, I keep hearing Chypre palatin it comes up a lot. These days.
Yeah,
it's been a topic.
Here we go. Let's just here. Why not? I'll put it on. Let's see what we got. Okay, a big decant of it. So let's see.
I'll be back. I'm listening, but I'll be
of
back.
course, we will be right here. So, do you have the particular year vintage of this one?
I don't, but it's from a person I've swapped a lot with.
Yeah,
I would assume it's a little older.
Yeah.
It's very. You know what? It's quite nice. I'm not to be perfectly honest, like the biggest Chypre lover in the world. Like a traditional Chypre. I don't know. It's not really like, but this is nice. It's got like a nice, like a creamy orange tone to it. Like not quite creamsicle, but nice. But it's not blowing me away relative to like, I don't know.
I trust your opinion. I'm not going to be going for a full bottle of anything from that house because it's too expensive, and then even more expensive if you have that big old bust on top.
I mean, I'm being lukewarm on it because I'm not the kind of person whose eyes would ever roll back in pleasure at smelling a Chypre. Like even as much as I respect and admire Mitsuko, it's not for me the revelatory personal experience that it is for other people. I kind of appreciate it from a distant standpoint as a style composition that I admire, and I appreciate the artistry in it, but it's not something that's personal for me. I think this is perfectly lovely. So of things that I have sampled recently, like this is a very well-made perfume. For me, it would not be a purchase, but
right. It doesn't compel you to want to wear it again and again. Like you don't see yourself getting very I don't know, smitten over it. You're not smitten. You're not it's not a love at first sniff. And I have so many Chypres. Like I really like, I think it is Bertrand Duchefort who composed it. But I don't know. I think go ahead. Sorry, Ray.
So folks in the chat are saying that it's more of like an ambery fragrance than a traditional Chypre. And I think that's true, but I think a lot of the things that do get marketed as Chypres or like revival Chypres these days do have that kind of opulent quality to it anyway. It's not, they're not all like, I do actually fare better with the greener stripe of Chypre, the more like oak moss heavy.
Oh yeah, I love those. Those are my favorite Chypres, the green Chypres. You know, the ones that were really popular in the 70s and early 80s with like galbanum and hyacinth and all these green and white florals, and then it dries down really mossy and musky. Those are the best.
So I do better with that than what this is, which is a very like resinous, warm. You know, now that you've reminded me that Duchefort did it, and that's correct.
Yeah.
You get it. There's a lot that's going on in this that's nice. It just wouldn't be something I would grab.
It sounds like it's more of sort of like an amber Chypre hybrid then, which kind of reminds me of the fragrance that I reviewed today, which was Scheherazade from Jean Dapré, which is the Chypre via amber. It opens very much like a Chypre and dries down to a resinous amber. That one's beautiful. I'm not trying to convince anybody to spend $160, $170 on it, but if they have some money thrown around and they're a responsible fragrance buyer, then hey, I could even maybe one day give somebody a sample if they're interested, since I'm pretty stingy about taking samples out of my own bottles. But I don't want to do it. Decant.
Did you just petition to receive more samples from people, but just say now you're going to be?
No, I know. That's what I was just going to start laughing. I know. I want samples, but I don't want to go. No, you know what? I actually do have plenty of samples to give. I have tons. But the tougher part is decanting. Like decanting samples out of my bottle, especially when the bottles have already defective sprayers like that one does. But maybe for somebody who's just like it was so like taken by the review, I could give them a sample of it. I could put a sample into a violin of Scheherazade.
So have either of you? So not JJ, because you haven't really done anything with MDCI, but Mr. Clean, have you tried Invasion Barbar?
I sampled it, and it seemed weak and not like what I kept hearing it was, and so I didn't do anything more with it. It gets a lot of hype. Is that one that you like, Ryan?
I did actually a video comparison between that. So I actually think that I did a video comparison between that and Hane Mori HM, which was like a darling of the early Fragcom as a cheapie. And I think they're very similar. Also very similar to Histoire de Parfum 1725. And in that space of the three of them, I thought Invasion Barbar was the most niche-y smelling, because there's some people get it more than others, and I get a lot of it. It's like a cooked shellfish note in Invasion Barbar, like a cooked lobster meat, like that kind of like creamy, warm thing. And Mr. Smelly saying Greg likes Invasion Barbar, but also admits it smells of baby sick. It is that kind of like, there's something in it that's a little bit, you know, I say cooked shellfish. I guess you could say baby sick. That's a less appealing way.
Baby sick. That is funny. That's a good description.
Funny. Which I would say is very much how I found it, and I found that particular accord or note to be a little off-putting in that fragrance. So
when I sampled it, I didn't find anything off-putting. I just didn't find anything exciting, and it seemed really low-key to me. Like it wasn't offensive to me at all. It just wasn't like, oh my god, I love this. I want to wear it.
I love 1725. I think that one's a fun wear. So
I'm surprised you like that as much as you do.
Isn't that funny?
It leaves kind of gourmand for me for a fougere, like almost like patisserie cookie kind of thing.
Interestingly enough, it's an example of one where I could sink my teeth into it, like sinking my teeth into some cookies.
Cook.
I think it's because of the lavender and the anise, because it prevents it from being almost too cloying, because anise pushes it sort of like into, like a spicier anisic direction. It's not, it's not all sweet. And, the lavender, I like it. I think it's a nice comfort wear. I like spraying a lot of it liberally on me.
It is very comforting. It is I would say that 1725, very relaxing.
If I were to do a gourmand sense week,
that would be one.
That would be one of them. And 5 o'clock au gingembre would be another one, which I know that you, Ryan, you kind of poo-pooed. You're like,
I guess I found it. When I was reading the note, I think part of it was reading the note pyramid. Like you're doing your research before you buy a fragrance, and that was a blind buy for me. That I had certain expectations with Serge Luton doing that note pyramid, and it's a lot. I don't know. It was just like it just wasn't as like bold on some of the notes that showed up in the note pyramid that I was hoping to get a lot of. I found it perfectly. I found it like perfectly pleasant. Nice honey note there with the ginger. Honey and ginger is a very lovely pairing, and it's doing a very nice job with it. But it wasn't everything I wanted it to be.
That's fair. That's fair. What's funny about it, I don't know what it is about my post on Instagram, but everybody and their uncle is liking that post. Like it has like 350 likes. I don't know what it is about that particular
which
one.
But,
well, when I shared my 5 o'clock au gingembre review on Instagram, it's just getting so many likes. I'm trying. It's not like it's a reel. I don't know what's going on. Like it's gone gangbusters. Like I'm gonna be like an Instagram star because of 5 o'clock au gingembre. I don't know what's happening. It is nice. I like it. I like it a lot. I mean, there's some, and I'm a huge Serge Luton's fan, and I don't like every one of them. I have a very difficult time with Serge Noir because it's just have you tried that one, Ryan? Serge Noir, the one that's
I have a decant of it that I've been waiting to try that I just got last weekend.
Okay.
So I have been meaning to try that for a while. I know that's a real love it or hate it one. Some people really love Serge Noir.
March, I wasn't holding the bottle up, but that'd be pretty funny. Yeah, I know. I have the bottle like sitting here, like here, 5 o'clock au gingembre.
What do you dislike about Serge Noir? Because looking at the note list, and
you would think I'd love it because it has a lot of clove. Yeah, it's just it smells like it's like burnt, like not smoky, burnt. Like if you smelt like this, like if you overcooked something in a pan to the point where like say you stepped away, which is a big no-no, and the whatever seasonings and stuff with the oil just overcooked, and there was a lot of cloves in it and a lot of pepper,
and the smoke alarm is about to go off.
Exactly, and that is what's going on. It smells like that, and it's just like a very weird kind of like it almost triggers my trigeminal nerve, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept of sense hitting the trigeminal nerve. So it is a nerve that's in your head, and it feels like a pinch, and that's what it does. It makes me, it gives me this, it elicits such.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I don't know if that I feel pinches, but I often describe it as an ice pick jabbed up into my sinuses. Is that the same thing?
A little bit, maybe.
Get that with the shit that I don't like. It's like ice pick stabbing me.
It's just too. It's not pretty. Not that fragrance needs to be pretty, but I'm trying to explain. It doesn't smell it just doesn't smell right in the opening. It's like,
I sprayed it. I'm smelling it on paper right now. It is weird.
Isn't it really fucking weird when you first spray it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I need to give. I'll give this a fair try at some point. But
some people live by it. I almost wonder if it's kind of similar to like cilantro, where some people are smelling it one way and other people are smelling it another way.
You know, that's
Like,
very possible. That's something we don't talk a lot about in fragrance, but because I don't think we understand it as much.
And I don't think
understand.
Yeah,
cilantro.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning it smells like cilantro. I don't want to get people in the audience confused. Like I'm not saying it's like the smell of cilantro, but people genetically, some people smell or taste cilantro and it smells leafy, herby, and it's palatable, and other people it smells like they're swallowing soap suds, and it's not palatable.
Yeah,
and it could be that.
You know, I'm fortunately in the camp that loves cilantro. I'm the guy who asks for extra cilantro, but then I'll be out to dinner with somebody who's like, "Oh my God, it tastes like soap. Why would you eat that?" So, yeah.
Right. I'm like so behind on the chat. I'm sorry, people. And we have 47 people here. Thank you so much.
We're officially in the part of the night that is Freeform now.
It's totally Freeform for the next 10, 15 minutes. It's Freeform, and then we'll start wrapping things up. And I love Freeform at the end. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Let me respond to Margie. It's Serge Noir by Serge Luton.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Margie. I saw that. Yeah,
Margie
Serge
loves
Noir.
her search.
It isn't a favorite of mine, and I love clove. So but I don't know. There's something about what is used and how it's used. Christopher Sheldrake is one of my favorite perfumers, but I'm not gonna like blindly love everything that he does. Like I thought L'Orpheline was just so boring. like it's just sort of like blend into the background. Like I don't even mind like ambient scents because I love ambient music and I like the idea of like an ambient fragrance. It's why I love Jean-Claude Elena, but L'Orpheline, they really wanted to evoke gray walls and they did a very good job of it. It's just
too good a job.
And it is like the most well, not that incense fragrances are exciting. Incense fragrance, I love incense fragrances, but I don't know if exciting is the right adjective for them. But it's just like the least compelling incense fragrance I ever smelled. It's just so that's one that I don't really like.
That's one of the least compelling incense fragrances you've ever smelled. That's quite a statement.
Yeah.
But you know, incense should be by its very nature something, you know, impactful. I guess it's the wrong type of impactful for you on this.
There wasn't in it. That's the problem. No impact. It's like weird.
Yeah, it should be impactful. I mean, incense, it should be a hit, right? Like, you know, one of my recent pickups. Hold on, where is it? It's right here somewhere. So, you know, incense. Come on, recent pickup.
I can't see it yet because, like, on my phone, it's like still like a 15-second delay. So I have to wait a while before I actually see what you're holding on.
You'll see it. You should be seeing it by now.
I see it now. Yeah, Leanne. Oh, that one's great.
Yes,
that is a good kind of challenge.
This is a lovely, wearable, fun incense.
Yeah. But if you ever have if you try Rien Intense incense, that stuff.
I feel like I had a sample. I'm not sure.
Nuclear,
but since I've had this, I haven't compared. So is the Intense more intense?
Oh, it is, and then some. It's like Rien is much more. It has much more of a diffusivity to it. Not that the Rien Intense incense doesn't. There's just something really. It's so dense and it's so compact. It's almost stifling if you wear too much of it. Like I can only wear like one spray of it, or else I would just suffocate. It's so strong. One of the strongest fragrances that I have. I can't
Really?
believe it is such. It's like an atomic bomb fragrance. Like you have to be really careful with it, but it's cool. But when I wear it, I only wear it like one little spray under my shirt. That's it. And that's more than enough. Like the bottle that I have, I'll never get through that bottle. Are you kidding me? I'm never going to get through any of my bottles. Who am I kidding at all?
Exactly.
But that one
No.
certainly, I'm never that I'm good. That's
All
going
right.
to be,
So
that's going to be
now
for
I need to-
posterity.
Now I need to dip into the intense because I really do like this one. Ryan, do you have experience with this one?
I do not. I should. I've been on a bit of an incense bender lately. I've for a while I found incense very challenging earlier on in my fragrance journey. For whatever reason, the idea of smelling like a church or that kind of like thing didn't really work for me. And then one day it finally clicked. And now I find incense.
So this one, not speaking to the intense that JJ was just speaking of, but the original one, it is an incense fragrance. However, it's not deep. It's not super deep and smoky. It's not churchy. It's perfumey. It's pretty. It's a very pretty scent. There's a nice amber in it.
Wonderfully well done aldehydic opening too. I love the aldehydes in it. People are discussing Diogenes in the chat. This is pretty remarkable. Like I'm glad that I'm burgeoning this kind of like side discussion in the chat right now. That's really encouraging. Somebody's comparing Sheldrake to Hemingway. This is what a literate group of people tuned in. Oh my goodness. Sartre also a womanizer, longtime lover of Simone de. Wow. Okay. Love this.
That is basic Morlarco.
Discussion.
So. You bring the really intelligent folks to your live streams, JJ.
Got some smarty pants here. Seriously.
And I would just like to say, Chypre Palatin, lovely. It's actually it's past the opening. It's beautiful fragrance. I have to say, it's actually winning me over slowly, bit by bit.
It gets talked about a lot. Are you saying for a reason?
I mean, yes. I think it's going to depend on your reference points. So I think if you're the vintage amber scents and Chypre styles, like if you're the kind of person who has tried a bunch of like vintage Shalimar versions and is that kind of collector, Chypre Palatin is probably not something that you absolutely need to run out and grab. But if you're looking for a modern fragrance that captures some of that like vintage splendor, like I'm like a good old bottle of Taboo or something in that vein, this would be worth a sniff. I think that's always the trouble. Like it depends on what kind of collector you are. Like, people who have lots of vintage bottles of stuff like this, sometimes like why would you go out and
right? It's rendered unnecessary, and that's exactly what I was thinking to myself. Like, I think I have my bases covered. I'm sure it smells great, but I wouldn't mind sampling it. But I had that hunch that while it is really well done and smells great, that it's just it won't be like new territory by any means. I wanted to bring up Gerard's comment here. I love La Couche de Diable. La Couche de Diable has a very generous use of this fractionated distillation of labdanum that they call hydrocarboresin. Hydrocarboresin is used in a lot of incense fragrances. Now, there's this highly coveted, fabled incense, Norma Kamali. And she uses, or not she, that's the house, the perfumer uses a great deal of hydrocarboresin in it. that's a brilliant, brilliant fragrance, La Couche de Diablo. Maybe I'll wear that tonight. I'm kind of feeling like I'm in that mood. It's so good.
My favorite from Serge Luton.
Mhm.
And just the other day, I was reading somebody describe it as scorched labdanum when they were describing that fragrance. And I thought that was such a lovely way to describe
Oh, yeah.
the ambiance of La Couche de Diablo, scorched labdanum. It is such a wonderful, dark way to frame labdanum, which is really like the heart of it. And it's interesting that I've seen so many people in just the past year or so talk about La Couche du Diablo when it seemed like it was just kind of like a underdog Serge Luton scent
Right,
a little
right.
bit.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to see that people love it.
Yeah. And that's like, that really is a culmination of all the great things that Christopher Sheldrake does. With that, I also love La Participace, which may be a little bit more challenging to noses, but that one is pretty damn awesome too. Pep, I consider that one to be a classic at this point. Comme des Garçons 2-man. That one makes me feel so. I don't know. It just gives me a good feeling and brings me good vibes. Comme des Garçons 2-man. A lot of great Comme des Garçons for sure. Duchefort is the king of incense. I don't think I could argue with that. I think some other people would have done a great. I mean, he was the one who did Avignon. Who did Passage d'Enfer? Did he do that one? Passage d'Enfer from L'Artisan is a wonderful one too. It was either he or Olivia Jacobetti. Kyoto from Comme des Garçons was like my signature scent for like a good year when I was 30 years old. And I remember I got a lot of desired attention wearing that one. There's something curiously sexy about that one to certain people, I guess. I remember going home with some. I'm not going to get into it, but I was wearing Kyoto those nights. Yeah. So if I smelled it, I go back to those salad days, as it were. Magie Noir by Lancôme is a recent Sheeper infatuation, and only now I realize Magie Noir's username. Yeah, Magie Noir, wonderful, wonderful stuff. It's such a shame that some of those harder bottles, some of those older bottles are harder to obtain.
So can we get a
do you want an update on the three?
No, so on the way it's pronounced, I think you said Magie. Is that because I've heard this pronounced 3 or 4 different ways? What is this? What is the typical standard?
Magie Noir.
Magie
Noir.
Magie.
If we're gonna really get into the French of it, Magie Noir.
Okay.
Magie Noir.
Magie.
So I know we're getting to the end of the stream here, and I promised my wife that I would mention this fragrance because she was like, "What? Are you going to review this fragrance on the live stream? You got to review this fragrance on the live stream," because she loves it so much. And I just got it. It's the latest acquisition in the collection, which was, I did post about this on Instagram, is Joram Studios Arborist.
I mentioned to you recently that I wanted to explore this house. There's a lot of buzz.
There is a lot of buzz, and I think it's warranted. It's a very good house. This, though, is one of the ones that the other one that gets a lot of talk is like Firewater, which I think is a very interesting fragrance. But this I smelled and instantly, because you, JJ, I think would appreciate it a lot because you love to be out in the woods.
I sure do.
I love the smell of being out in the woods, and this has that feeling very nicely with like a gorgeously slightly like animalic base, like the very kind of like warm skin in a good way, kind of like not like somebody worked out and smells like they need to go hit the showers, but just kind of like a wonderfully warm undercurrent of like good smelling skin, like body. It's really something.
That sounds good.
It's very good. It is.
Can we put that in the chat type? Can we type that in?
Yes.
Yeah, please do that. So I have a very small list of this at this point of houses to explore, trying to keep it as small as possible. And that's one of them. I've already been successful at crossing off others and realizing that I've fulfilled that. But that one I haven't experienced anything from Joram Studios, and so many of them sound Arborist.
Pickwick's, JJ. They've got.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Got to get back up to Portsmouth, and I have to still try that other one, Apotheker. What is the one?
The Holy Mountain. Yes.
Holy Mountain.
Okay. Yes.
So is that in production still, or do they just still have it there?
They resurrected it. So when they brought the house back, they resurrected it from the formula. Yes. Okay. So these are both of these I got at Pickwick's, and they are. I mean, I sometimes give artisanal perfume a hard time. Like this is these are as good as any artisanal perfumes I've tried. Like these are premium. I'm not trying to hype them, but they're really something.
So I have this question here. What are my top 3 favorite houses? Yeah, that's so tough. Hermes is a top house. Serge Lutens. And a third one, I would say Caron. So those are the 3. And there's some, if I could go into the top 10, it would be like L'Artisan Parfumeur, the House of Etro, Lorenzo Villoresi. Oh my God, he would have to tie with one of the top 3. It's hard to narrow it down to 3, but those are some of my favorites. Yeah, I mean, Guerlain is up there, but not the way they've been going as of late. I'm not looking over at what I have. Oh my God, Santa Maria Novella is in my top 10.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Diptyque is up there too. So yeah, that gives you an idea of some of the, and that's purely based on how many fragrances from that house that I fell so absolutely head over heels for that I actually have bottles of it. So there you go.
JJ, the month of October is coming to a close.
Indeed.
You could only wear one fragrance until November 1st. Which are you wearing?
If there was only one fragrance that I could wear from now until November 1st.
It's only several days.
Yeah, it's not that many days, thankfully. It's funny because I have so many fragrances to choose from and so little bandwidth left in the evening. I have to turn around and look at what I have and think about that. I have been really feeling this direction of warmth and autumnal. You know what? I think it would be Aromatics Elixir. I wore it last night. I wore it last night. Aromatics Elixir from Clinique. That may come as such a surprise to some people, but I think that would be it.
Like, Clinique.
Is
this a classic?
It is. It is a stone cold classic. A Bernard Chant, who also did Aramis, Cabochard. He did several for Aramis, actually. He did Clinique Aromatics Elixir. And it is this rosy, chamomile, honeyed, patchouli. It's larger than life. This is another one where you don't need to spray too much, but it just gives me it fills me up with such nostalgia and wistfulness. I just remember smelling it in like the ether when I was younger. So it's tied to that scent memory, and it's just gorgeous. It's just it's a meaningful fragrance. So I would choose that one. And that's one of my top 10 all-time favorite fragrances. And I kind of tie Aramis 900 into that because that's sort of a variation on that theme that Bernard Chant created for the Aramis line for men, which is also quite lovely. So if you allowed me to have a second one, I'd alternate between the two of them.
You don't get a second one.
I don't. So it's Aromatics Elixir. There you go.
Like 5 or 6 days left of the month.
So I could easily wear
just
that
one for those several days. Ryan, what are you picking?
So it wins because it's a kind of a novelty. It's one of the newer things I got because I swapped some stuff for it and it arrived, and I've really fallen in love with it. Is Chopard's Black Incense Maliki, which I think is such a lovely flanker to the Oud Maliki, which was done by Dominique Ropillon. This is a Maurice, and I can't remember who else he partnered with to deliver this, but it is such a great dark, like I'm thinking spooky time. End of October for me is always Halloween, so it's got to be something dark. It's got to be smoky.
Can somebody type that one in the chat? Because
I will type it. I will type it in the chat.
Somebody might know, and you can probably talk. Somebody else will know what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah. So Black Incense Maliki is like, it's this just smoky dark leather. It's similar to the leather in Gucci Guilty Absolute, but it's done here over the top of the core of Dominique Ropillon's original creation. So it's got this wonderful depth to it. It is just so smoky, so pungent at the top, and then it dries down very nicely to this like kind of smooth mid. I think it's beautiful. It's really, really, really good.
Margie, are you referring to Aromatics Elixir? Oh, I'm so happy. So. I'm so excited that you have that. I think it is a bewitching fragrance for sure. That is a good descriptor for it. Favorite cerebral fragrance? Ooh. So we have to wrap up pretty soon, but that's kind of a cool question too. Cerebral fragrance. One that stimulates the mind as well as the body and the soul, huh?
That's a very interesting thing to think through.
That's something I might want to jot down and explore.
That is a good one to explore. Yeah. I wouldn't know how to answer that right now. I'm sure I don't know. But that is a good topic.
For sure. I used to have Musk Malaki, and I wasn't too crazy about it. It was a blind buy. It was cheap enough, but something about it just smelled too, I don't know, like too suederall-y. Like it had like kind of like it smelled too much like a modern Tom Ford kind of leather for me to even like associate it with musk. I wasn't too pleased with it.
Yeah, that one. So I haven't tried the line beyond the original in this one because not all of them were done by Ropillon, and Ropillon is one of my favorite perfumers, and I think he does well with this sort of spicy woody space when he's handed that as a brief. So I liked the original Oud Maliki a lot. Kind of in the same vein as like Costume National, if you've tried that. So this one, I initially didn't rush out to try it, but yeah, I was very impressed by how well this does like a smoky leather and oud style. I don't get a ton of incense from it, despite incense showing up in the name. It's a smoky leather and oud. There's not an incense thing going on in this to my nose, but
I really liked Alex's choices for his cerebral fragrances, and I'm inclined to agree. Après Landais, L'Eau d'Hiver from Frederic Malle. Also another one, Dans tes bras from Frederic Malle is really cerebral to me. Relique d'Amour, Oritza à la Grande. I also would throw those into the category of like experiential fragrances. They're more for me to sit down and just experience them. It's not like they're not dumb reaches. They're not like, okay, time to spray and go and get my day started. Like it's like they're arresting. They like demand your attention and you just sit with them, meditate with them.
That's an excellent, you mentioned Oritza El Legrand as being that, and I got this in a swap recently and I've been getting to know it not in the sense that I'm speak with it, but Relique d'Amour.
Relique d'Amour is, to me, like one of the most beautiful fragrances that I have ever smelled. That, and two, so I almost getting back to houses I really like. Oh, it's La Grande. If we're just thinking in terms of volume, I have, I think, 5 of them, 6 of them. I can't even keep track. But there's 2 from the house that are the other one that would be really cerebral is Sheeplemousse and Relique d'Amour. They're just, to me, they're almost poetic.
I would agree. That describes this fragrance beautifully. I think this fragrance is absolutely breathtaking. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say it fits that category very well.
It has the feeling of coolness. It feels like when I wear it, I feel like I'm outside even when I'm not. There's something about it that almost captures the smell of cool air. I don't know if it's just the lily or muguet accord in it, coupled with the olibanum and incense. It's just, I don't know. People just look up Relique d'Amour on Fragrantica. I wrote a review on it. I'm much better with the written word. Read my words and you'll get my impressions on it. The time is now 9:45. This was actually the longest. We reached a record. This is one of the longest Effluvium episode, but I think the time has now come for me to revisit one last time the first impressions, starting off with
because you know how I feel about first impressions.
Yes, we have to check in 3 times. I always make sure at the beginning, in the middel, and at the end. Bell'Antonio, love it. I love it. It's dried down considerably, but I love the dry down on it. I really like that one. I really do. It there is the tobacco accord kind of stays into the dry down even more so than the coffee. Yeah. That's a thumbs up. Sweet William. It's kind of undecided as far as how much I enjoy the dry down. This is one that definitely deserves some more time with it. I loved the opening and I want to go back to the opening and then make a fuller assessment. So I think these 2 are tied. For this week, we have a tie. The past few weeks, we only had, a single winner, but these 2 are tied. Sweet William from Carner and Hilda Soliani, Bell'Antonio.
Wait, what was the thought on the third one, though?
It was just sort of like it smelled too much like Minotaur and then dried down to this kind of generic amber dry down, like a modern amber dry down. So it was just kind of like a... So that's the extent of that one. So...
Well, these were 2 pretty good sample first impressions then.
Yeah. I mean, let me type them in the chat and then we'll close things up. So Hilda Soliani, Bell'Antonio, and Carner Sweet William. Those are the winners. So in case people want to have that. All right, so 33 people. I think we're ending on a good note. It is now 9:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Clean, for being a part of this for this week. Ryan, always a pleasure. Wonderful discussion. And next week,
Rachel,
oh my God, thank you. I'm tired. I'm a tired guy.
I'm here for you, man.
We would be remiss without mentioning Rachel. Rachel is wonderful. It's so great to meet such great people in this community. And I can't extend my gratitude enough. And she's one of the best. So I'm so glad that she could join us tonight. It's unfortunate she had to leave us to tend to her little tyke, but we know how important that is. So thank you so much, everyone. Please tune in next Tuesday. And until then, be well, guys. Stick around for a little bit of backstage and we'll chat a little bit more. All right, everyone. Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.